Yes, one qualification I put to it is this is a process that doesn't seem unlikely, but it happens all the time. That, for instance, not only mitochondria but chloroplasts are also the product of this kind of thing. But the fact that we got this particular prokaryotic organism to work as a generator of ATP is very much a chance event. Okay.
Yeah, I want to clarify something you said fairly early on about they got the genome of these protists, and they see genes coding for certain proteins, and they say, "Wow, we think these proteins are being rare."
Yes.
But this is a tricky question. So if they're not watching the organism, the proteins, right? They're just looking at the genome and saying, "Oh, here are genes for these."
Oh, right.
So there's sort of for me, there's a missing link there. Like, do we know for sure that those organisms do actually make those proteins, or is it just looking at the genes?
We know that they make the proteins, so they do produce those particular enzymes and structural proteins. There's some ambiguity right now about exactly how they're being used. So it's a little bit of speculation to say, well, Triplex is using these neuronal enzymes to secrete digestive enzymes. But it seems likely. When you look at the cell, what you find is it does have these things called vesicles, and it does have it fusing with the membrane. But you're right. It would be nice to close that last little gap and find specifically, this protein that we use in our synapses is also present right here at the same point in this digestive vesicle. Science never ends. Yeah. Give it time. They're working on it. Over here.
Welcome to California, and thank you very much for your illuminating presentation. I'm glad you ended with this slide right here.
This is my cranky slide, yes.
Well, it's cranky, but it's also very relevant to who we are as freethinkers and humanists and how we engage with one another and in the larger community. Let me give you one example. A few months ago, a few dozen of us went down to Lodi. The city council there decided to rescind its policy of non-sectarian prayer in favor of quote-unquote uncensored prayer. Among the comments that we were exposed to there was from one city council member who was also the principal of an elementary school, who said that she was going to be looking to find novel ways to introduce God into the curriculum. So,
really?
What we're faced with here, is a situation where those people who believe, on the right side of that slide, and then it should also be noted that these people can't even be bothered to listen to the words of their professed Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in terms of praying publicly and praying privately. So my question is, what can we do, both as individuals and as a large community, to be profound, reasoned advocates for reason, science, and a secular civil law, particularly in minority communities who have had their faith traditions abolished, basically, or denigrated by those who believe in the Creationist meaning that you presented here.
I was struck by one thing you said about trying to find novel ways to introduce God. I think in a public school classroom, in a science classroom in particular, the only way you should introduce things is by evidence and reason. And I know those are novel Christians, okay? They're not used to thinking that way. But I would just strike it down right there and say, well, if you want to introduce God, don't try to invent new excuses for him. Show us the evidence. Show us scientific evidence. And they'll probably say things like, well, he's supernatural, there's going to be any scientific evidence. And then you say, well, then that doesn't belong in science class. It's that simple. What can you do about it? Gosh, I sometimes yell at people because there's an interesting phenomenon going on in schools. If you're a parent and your child is in school in science and the teacher introduces evolution, what do? Well, in our case, most of us would say privately, oh, well, that's good, that's the right thing to do. If you're a fundamentalist, what do? You march down and you yell at the principal and the teacher. We've got to start doing that. Why aren't we getting in their faces? If they're trying to introduce God into the classroom, you go down there and you tell them, hey, I'm a parent of a child in this school. I don't believe in God. I don't think it's appropriate for you to do this. And you yell at the principal, you apply some heat, and make them think twice about doing this. Because that's exactly what the other side has been doing all along. And we don't. The other thing we can do that would be different from the other side, that would be really good, is when you've got a good teacher in the schools who is doing things like introducing evolution into the classroom. Don't sit silent at home. Go to those parent-teacher meetings, go to PTA meetings, or when you meet them in the supermarket, or if you make a special appointment, say, tell them they're doing a good job. And most importantly, tell their administrators, tell the principal, yeah, this teacher is good. She's doing the right thing in my classroom. And that way, hopefully, we can counterbalance what's been going on. Because right now, the noise machine is all one-sided. We need to make more noise. Yes?
I noticed that you use the term creationists rather than intelligent design, which they seem to be preferring. What other ways are there to kind of combat their rebranding to sound more sciencey?
Consistency, yeah, that we've been applying consistency. They are creationists. Come on. I mean, this is one of the things they protest most fiercely about when you call them creationists. But they are arguing that a intelligence so vast and so incomprehensible it must be divine intervened in our evolutionary history. That's creationism. It's plain and simple. So don't let them get away with it. I mean, I don't call them intelligent design theorists. I call them intelligent design creationists. So, back there.
Is the notion of irreducibly complex systems unscientific?
Well,
Altogether?
not altogether. I mean, it's an interesting idea initially. It's also wrong, right? What irreducible complexity says is that if you've got a structure that is a complicated set of parts, and if you remove one, the entire structure falls apart, you don't get function out of it, they say it's irreducibly complex. And it's true, it is. Okay. Where they make a leap is when they say that cannot be evolved progressively. Because it can. We can show this over and over again how different processes can produce structures that eventually are incapable of losing Jesus. It's also something. So it's not intrinsically unscientific to ask a question like that. Where the intelligent design creationists have gone bad is that they haven't paid any attention to literature. This idea was introduced by Pharyngula in, I think it was 1919. He talked specifically about processes that could generate more complexity in the cell. And when you read it, it's irreducible complexity right there. And what he's saying is completely opposite of what the creationists say, because what Pharyngula was saying is, hey, there's these genetic processes that will spontaneously generate these more complex pathways. And he suggested it was a little bit of a problem for evolution in the sense that it could produce rampant complexity all over the place. And it would be hard to weed it out. But we have processes that weed it out too, some of the time. Yes?
You mentioned earlier that you're possibly in the process of writing a book. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, it's expensive, feeling extremely guilty because here I am. I'm not writing it right now. Yes, I have a book contract. I'm supposed to get it done. Here I am, playing around in California. Yeah, I'm writing a book